long time no see. We have the stomach flu. So that's where I've been. I have to do Romans 11, which I've read already, and I wrote down in my study notes, but I haven't filmed it. We were supposed to have done, I think we're supposed to be on 12 or 13 today, but I don't remember, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I'm behind, but it has been very hard, especially when little kids don't know how to like run into the toilet or a bucket and they're just puking wherever they happen to be. So it's tricky. Okay, the remnant of Israel. I ask then, has God rejected his people? By no means, for I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Do you not know that the scripture says of Elijah, how he appeals to God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets, they have demolished your altars, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. But what is God's reply to him? I have kept for myself 7,000 men, who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So too, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. But if it is by grace, it is no longer on basis of works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace. What then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that would not see, and ears that would not hear, down to this very day. God has closed the eyes of Israel because of his plan. A lot of them are blind right now, even still. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they cannot see, and bend their backs forever. Gentiles grafted in, that's most of us, right? So I ask, did they stumble in order that they might fall? By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous. So if you haven't been following along, the Israelites do not like the Gentiles. The Israelites believe that they automatically get to heaven just because of their, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their ancestors. And they don't believe Gentiles are worthy of salvation in any way. But Gentiles, if you remember reading in Acts, Gentiles were like mostly the only ones that were accepting of Jesus Christ. And the Jews themselves denied the Messiah. So the Gentiles are grafted in, and it says that Israel becomes jealous because the Israelites are like, Gentiles? Where was I? Verse 12, now if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? Now I am speaking to you, Gentiles. Inasmuch then as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry, in order somehow to make my fellow Jews jealous, and thus save some of them. For if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean, life from the dead? If the dough offered as first fruits is holy, so is the whole lump. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. But if some branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches. That means don't dislike the Jews. If you are, remember it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. Then you will say, branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. That is true. They were broken off because of their unbelief. But you stand fast through faith. Do not become proud, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. That means you can mess up. The Israelites messed up, his chosen people. And, look at what happened to them. Even still, he's going to redeem them. But it's saying here, the Israelites denied God and they're in trouble. Or denied the Messiah and they're in trouble. So the same thing can happen to you. So note then that the kindness and the severity of God, severity toward those who have fallen, but God's kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you too will be cut off. And even they, if they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in, for God has the power to graft them in again. For if you were cut off from what is by nature a wild olive tree, and grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these, the natural branches, be grafted back into their own olive tree? That's saying, as Gentiles were grafted in, but he's going to bring back the Israelites also, and they are the original chosen people, so they will be grafted in also. Don't Pray for Israel, okay? This is verse 25. Lest you be wise in your own heart, I do not want you to be unaware of this mystery, brothers. A partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. Once all of the Gentiles have come in, after God saves all the Gentiles he's going to save, all the people he's going to save, right? There's a partial hardening until that happens, until all the Gentiles are saved. That's why you need to watch Israel. And there's so many awesome YouTube videos and sermons about the prophecies of the Old Testament and the New Testament and what's happening to Israel now. And it's fascinating. Of course, we'll never know the time Jesus comes back, because the Bible says we won't know. And those that are telling you that, it's going to happen at XYZ time, then you know for certain it's not that time. Because just stay ready. Right, we learned that in the Gospels, to stay ready. But watch Israel, and you can even look up. The, what is it called? The red calf. Is it the red calf? And the rebuilding of the temple. Is it going to be rebuilt? There's like all of this really cool, interesting stuff about the end times. And there's a rumor that they sent a red calf, which once they rebuild the temple. So okay, let me just side tangent. One of the prophecies that need to be fulfilled. A lot of Christians argue about whether this prophecy has already been fulfilled, but some say it hasn't. And truly, we won't know, because God says we won't know. But there's rumors that they're going to rebuild the temple soon because of the religious shift in over in the Middle East. And then once they build that temple, they need to sacrifice. I think it's just one red calf, but it has to be full red calf. And they hadn't been able to find or breed of a pure red calf. And then I think there was 2 from Texas that were pure red that they shipped over to Israel. And they have to search every single hair on the calf's body, and there cannot be one white hair. Otherwise it's no good. It has to be pure red calf to sacrifice in the new temple. Anyway, all this kind of stuff is very fascinating to watch. And there was even a prophecy in here that said, because wasn't Israel made a nation again? It was like 1948. I could totally be making that up. But I think the UN recognized Israel again in 1948. Or was it 1941? Sometime in the 40s, the UN recognized Israel again. If you follow what has happened in the Bible and what has happened in real life, the Bible prophesied all of it thousands of years ago. And I don't understand why people don't believe, because the probability that these prophecies will be fulfilled in the order in which they've been fulfilled perfectly is mathematically impossible. And the fact that it has been happening, and these aren't documents that we didn't write this Bible 100 years ago and then tried to fulfill the prophecies ourselves by doing these things. This was written thousands of years ago, and the course over the entire Bible was written over a long time. I think it was from the last book of the Old Testament. I think it was 400 years. Then they wrote Matthew, and 400 years. And then when Jesus came, Jesus himself fulfilled 300 of those prophecies written over 400 years later. The probability it's not. I don't understand why people don't believe. I really don't. Because even if you needed proof, which you shouldn't, it's here, and it's remarkable. Let's see. Where was I? The deliverer will come from Zion. He will banish ungodliness from Jacob, and this will be my covenant with them when I take away their sins. In verse 26, when it says Jacob, it's talking about Israel, because Jacob's name turned to Israel after he wrestled with the Lord, and from Jacob, or Israel, came the 12 tribes, because he had 12 sons. So if that's confusing to you, Jacob is Israel. Okay? As regards the gospel, they are enemies for your sake. But as regards election, they are beloved for the sake of their forefathers. For the gifts of the calling of God are irrevocable. For just as you were at one time disobedient to God, but now have received mercy because of their disobedience, so they too have now been disobedient, in order that by mercy shown to you, they also may now receive mercy. For God has consigned all to disobedience, that he may have mercy on all. Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and how inscrutable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Or who has given a gift to him that he might be repaid? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever. Amen. Look at verse 34. Is so beautiful. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Literally no one. Thank goodness. Because why would you want to worship someone who has the same kind of mind that you have? Who has been his counselor? No one. Thank goodness. I would surely not want to worship myself because I can't even cure my own problems. I wouldn't want to worship another human because they have faults just like I do. It is good that no one knows the mind of the Lord and we don't understand his ways, because then that just means all the more that he is much mightier and much more powerful and perfect. And that's the kind of God I worship. I wrote some notes here. I don't really know what I said in my notes. Romans 11. Oh yes, okay, so when talking about how Israel's kind of in darkness right now, they can't really see, God has a purpose for them, and he's doing this on purpose. There's an intention, and just like he has a purpose for the Israelites, he has a purpose for you. That's why you're here. And your life will become more peaceful, more restful, more fulfilling, richer, deeper, truly a good life. It's a great life. Not without challenges, but true fulfillment, because when you start to live out God's purpose for your life, and there is one. God still has a plan for Israel despite their hardness of heart. God still has a plan regardless. Okay, so you may have denied Christ. You may be a little squirrely right now in your way of life. You may not be living as a Christian is supposed to live, but God still has a plan for you. Just like he still had a plan for Israel. Despite their hardness of heart, despite your disobedience, and despite your sin, God can still use you. That's not going to stop him. And he's going to love you regardless. God hasn't abandoned you. I'm sure the Israelites feel like God has abandoned them, right? They thought this a million times, even though they've been rescued time and time again in the whole Bible. But God has a plan and a purpose, and his focus may not be you right now, as the focus may not be the Israelites right now, but there's a plan and work. Little do we know, and you have to trust it, which is hard to do, which is the point. God doesn't want our love without challenge, because then we're just like robots without an opinion, right? It's easy to love something that's just always easy and good. He wants you to love him even in the hard times, and that's true love, right? You've failed him, just like the Israelites have failed him 100 times over, but God isn't giving up on you either. It's in God's mercy, not our earnings, not your failures and your sin. It's in God's mercy that we are saved. And then I wrote some more notes. I went and used my cultural study Bible and all that, and I'll do a Bible study with you guys together. I try to make these videos pretty quick because they're from my Bible study group on Instagram. A bunch of gals are together doing Bible studies, and because of the season of life I'm in, it's very tricky to do something so extensive. Not so much independently, but to film it is pretty hard because then I have to edit and upload and all this. But I would love to do a big deep study with you guys. That's a lot of fun. But I did continue to study Romans 11 after I read it the first time. Just because Israel rejected God doesn't mean God rejected Israel. Just because you've turned your back on God doesn't mean he's turned his back on you. Gentiles are mostly in Rome, so Jewish people thought God was done with the Jews, and their faithlessness can... Oh, I love this part. The Israelites' faithlessness can't cancel God's faithfulness. Wow. And the Israelites' temporary blindness is helping us, because as Gentiles were being grafted in, God's call may not make sense. God used Moses, and Moses couldn't talk. Oh, that's what I was writing. Paul is Jewish, and he's talking to the Gentiles. That's what the note that I wrote a note here. I was trying to figure out what it meant. God's call may not make sense. You may be like, God, I could do so much more work in this other state, or God, I could do so much more work with this other position in my job, but God's call may not make sense. Just like he used Moses, who didn't talk very well, who didn't speak very well, and he used Paul to speak to the Gentiles, and he used Peter to speak to the Jews. Wasn't Peter a Gentile? Right, so you'd think like he would want you with your people, because it just makes sense. And oftentimes God's call doesn't make sense, and I think that's reassuring, because you may be in a position in your life right now where you're just like, doesn't God know that this isn't going to work here? You know what I mean? We're human. We think like that. All right, I will see you. My son filmed a Archer and Olive box opening, and I can't wait to look at it. He filmed it on my phone. So I'll probably upload that if he's in frame and it's even worth looking at, right? But I'm gonna upload this first, and then I'll upload that video later. But you know what? I'm gonna pick up, what's today? Friday the 9th of June. Yeah, so Monday, June 12th, God willing, I will start with Romans 12. That's fun. We're going to do Romans 12 on June 12th. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Thank you for being patient with me. If you'd feel like shooting some prayers our way, because the kiddos are sick. I'm freezing, but I'm not, and I'm hoping I'm not getting a fever. That's why I'm wrapped in this blanket, even though I guess it's warm in here, but I feel very cold. But I'm just trying my best to keep up with the Bible study. You know, but times get a little tricky sometimes, and I appreciate your patience. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.